This is the second part of multiplying negative as well as positive numbers. In the first part, we have seen these rules that when you multiply a positive and a positive number, the product is positive. When you multiply a negative number and a positive number, then the product is negative. And when you multiply two negative numbers, the product is positive. When we learned these rules, we multiplied only two numbers at a time. In this part, we are going to see how to multiply more than two numbers. So let's start with two numbers. The first one is this, negative 5 multiplied by negative 2. We know that negative negative gives positive, so the answer is positive 10. 5 2s are 10. What if we multiply three negative numbers? All numbers are negative here, and we want to multiply three numbers. So let's keep the first two numbers as is, that is negative 5 multiplied by negative 2, and the third number is multiplied by negative 3. We know that negative 5 multiplied by negative 2 equals 10. That means this problem is like multiplying 10 by negative 3. Now you have a positive and a negative number, that means the answer is going to be negative. 10 3s are 30, so the answer is negative 30. Now let's multiply four negative numbers. Let's keep the first three numbers as is and multiply that by negative 4. Now if you look at the above example, we know the product of the first three numbers, that is the product of negative 5 and negative 2 and negative 3 is negative 30. That means what we have to do here is we have to multiply negative 30 by 4. Now you have two negative numbers. Negative 30 is a negative number and negative 4 is also a negative number. So negative negative is positive. So your answer is going to be positive. 3 4s are 12. That means the answer is positive 120 or just 120. No sign is positive sign. Let's multiply 5 numbers this time. Negative 5 multiplied by negative 2 multiplied by negative 3 multiplied by negative 4 multiplied by negative 1. The product of first four numbers is 120. That means you are going to multiply 120 by negative 1. 1 positive, 1 negative, so the product is going to be negative. So 120 ones are 120, so the answer is negative 120. If you look at all the products here, the first one is positive, the next one is negative, again positive, again negative. Can you figure out something here? In the first problem, we multiplied two negative numbers. After that, we multiplied three negative numbers. Then we multiplied four negative numbers, and in the end we multiplied 5 negative numbers. That means the product was positive when you multiplied 2 and 4 numbers, and the product was negative when you multiplied 3 or 5 negative numbers. So what must be the rule here? You can conclude that when you multiply even number of negative numbers, the product is positive. When you multiply even number of negative numbers, that means 2 or 4 in this case. And when you multiply odd number of negative numbers, that means 3 and 5 in our case, the product is negative. When you multiply odd number of negative numbers, all the numbers should be negative, then the product is negative. Now that we know these rules, can you answer this question? What would be the sign of a product of 10 negative numbers? Any 10 negative numbers. You don't know what the numbers are. You just know that there are 10 negative numbers. The product of such numbers will be positive. How about product of 99 negative numbers? Any negative numbers? 99 is an odd number. That means the product will be negative. 10 is an even number, therefore the product will be positive, and 99 is an odd number, therefore the product will be negative. So without knowing the actual numbers, you can tell what would be the sign of the product. Now let's revise one more rule that we already know. You can multiply in any order. You know that 10 5s are 50 and 5 10s are 50. We have all learned that when we learned our times tables. That means 10 multiplied by 5 is 50 and 5 multiplied by 10 is 50 as well. So we can multiply numbers in any order, and this is true not only for positive numbers but also for negative numbers and also for positive and negative numbers together. And why did we revise this? Because when we multiply more than two numbers together, then changing the order of the numbers can help us make the problem easy. Let's see how to do that. Let's take this example. Negative 5 multiplied by negative 27 multiplied by negative 2. This problem can be written without parentheses as well. Whether there are parentheses or not is the same problem. So when you look at this problem, what you could do is, instead of multiplying 5 by 27, you can change the order and make it easy. If you change the order, you can do it like this. Negative 5 multiplied by negative 2 multiplied by negative 27. Now it is easier to multiply negative 5 and negative 2. 5 2s are 10 and two negative numbers we are multiplying. That means the answer is positive 10. So what you have to do is 10 multiplied by negative 27. 27 10s are 270. We have a positive and a negative number, so the answer is going to be negative. The product is negative 270. This problem I could have solved without looking at the sign. I could have simply ignored the sign and I could have said 5 2s are 10 and 10 27s are 270. So the product is 270, and in my problem there are three negative numbers. 3 means odd number of negative numbers. That means the product will take negative sign. So the answer is negative 270. So here onwards, when we do all the multiplications, we won't consider the signs, we'll ignore the signs, and based on the rules that we have learned, we will give the right sign to the product. Let's take another example. Negative 4 multiplied by 10 multiplied by negative 8. This problem has two negative numbers. 2 is an even number. That means the final answer will have a positive sign. So let's ignore the signs and multiply. 4 10s are 40. 40 multiplied by 8. 4 8s are 32. That means 40 8s are 320. Or you could have multiplied this in another order like this. 4 8s are 32. 32 multiplied by 10. 32 10s are 320. You can multiply in any order you like. We know that the product is going to take positive sign because we have two negative numbers in the problem. The next one is this. 3 multiplied by negative 6 multiplied by negative 2 multiplied by 8 multiplied by negative 20. Now let's see how many negative numbers are here. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 negative numbers. That means odd number of negative numbers. That means the answer is going to be negative. So I have written a negative sign here, and whatever my product is, that product I'll write after this negative sign. Now I can ignore the signs and do the multiplication. What about the positive numbers here? Do I need to count positive numbers? No, because positive numbers are not going to affect the sign. I only have to check how many negative numbers are there, because the product will take the sign based on the number of negative numbers. So let's multiply now. Ignore the signs. I feel that multiplying the three middle numbers first is easy. So I'm going to say 6 2s are 12 and 12 8s are 96. So I want to do 3 multiplied by 96 multiplied by 20. Now let's multiply 3 and 20. 23s are 60. That means we have to do 96 multiplied by 60. That means multiply 96 by 6 and put an extra 0 after that. So 96 multiplied by 60 equals 5760. Remember, we have 3 negative numbers in the problem, and that's why we have already written the negative sign. So after the negative sign, I'm going to write 5760. So the answer is negative 5760. Let's take one more example. 12 multiplied by negative 13 multiplied by negative 14 multiplied by negative 15 multiplied by 0 multiplied by negative 16 multiplied by 17. We don't need to count the positive numbers, so let's count the negative numbers. 1, 2, 3. Wait, do I need to count the negative numbers here? No, because one of the terms is 0. We are multiplying by 0. That means the answer is going to be 0. I don't have to count the negative numbers. I don't have to think whether the product will have positive sign or negative sign, because the product is going to be 0. 0 multiplied by anything is 0, and 0 is neither positive nor negative. So in this case, the product is 0 and it will have no sign.